During a sweltering summer in rural Georgia, my friend, Marcus, and I found a website that claimed to lead its users to random, interesting locations nearby. We were both home from college, bored out of our minds and craving any sort of adventure, so we figured, why not? The website was supposed to use some kind of algorithm to generate coordinates for anomalies, places where strange or interesting things were more likely to happen. It sounded like a bunch of pseudoscience, but we were desperate for entertainment. One evening, as the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the fields and forests that surrounded our town, we decided to give the website a try. We followed the generated coordinates to a spot deep in the woods, a place we'd never been despite growing up here. The dirt road twisted and turned, leading us further away from the familiar. As we drove, the trees seemed to close in around us, their branches like fingers against the sky now painted in deep oranges and purples. We parked the car when the road ended, and the GPS told us we were close. The air was thick with humidity, and the chorus of cicadas was nearly deafening. Equipped with flashlights, we followed the final set of directions on foot, the beam of our lights barely penetrating the darkness of the dense woods. After what felt like miles, we stumbled upon a clearing. It was eerily silent here. The noise of the cicadas dulled as if we'd stepped into another world. In the center of the clearing stood an old, dilapidated house, its windows dark, the paint peeling from its weathered siding. It looked like it had been abandoned for decades, a relic of a bygone era. Curiosity overcoming our initial apprehension, we approached the house, the floorboards on the porch groaning under our weight. The front door was slightly ajar, swinging gently in the night breeze. Inside, the air was cool, a reprieve from the summer heat, but it carried a musty odor that made me wrinkle my nose. Our flashlights revealed a living room frozen in time, dust-covered furniture shrouded in shadows. We moved cautiously, the silence so complete we could hear our own breaths echoing in the empty space. It was as we explored further, finding a kitchen with dishes still in the sink and a dining room with chairs upturned, that the feeling of unease began to settle over me. Marcus, always the braver of us, led the way to the staircase, its banister coated in dust. As we ascended, each step creaked ominously under our weight. At the top of the stairs, we found a hallway lined with doors. The first few rooms were empty, abandoned bedrooms with decaying furniture and peeling wallpaper. But it was the last room at the end of the hallway that held a macabre surprise. The door was slightly ajar, and as we pushed it open, our flashlights fell upon a shocking scene. The room was unlike the rest of the house, clean and dust-free. In the center stood a table with 2 chairs, one of them occupied. A mannequin wearing a shirt sat at the table, a teacup poised in its hand, as if frozen in time. But it was the details that sent shivers down my spine. The table set for tea, the other chair pulled out slightly as if waiting for someone to sit, and the photographs on the wall, all of the same woman, her eyes scratched out in every picture. We stood there, frozen, until the silence was broken by a sound from downstairs, the distinct creak of a door opening or closing. Panic surged through me, my heart pounding in my chest. We hadn't heard anyone enter, had been sure the house was abandoned. Without a word, Marcus and I turned and ran, not stopping to look back as we hurtled down the stairs and out into the night. We didn't stop running until we reached the car, throwing ourselves inside and locking the doors. Only then did I remember that we had not closed the door when we entered the house, but it was closed when we ran out. Hey, Marcus, did we close the door when we entered the house just now?
No.
Are you sure? Yep, I kept the door open, but the door was closed when we ran out just now. silence. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The images of that room etched into my mind. The website had promised an anomaly, and it had delivered. The drive back from that haunted house was cloaked in a tense silence, each of us lost in our own rattled thoughts, replaying the night's events over and over. The familiar streets of our town offered little comfort, and the glow from the street lamps seemed too harsh, too real compared to the shadows we had escaped. As we pulled into Marcus's driveway, neither of us was eager to end the night alone, haunted by what we'd seen. "Man, do you think we should go back during the day? See if it's just as creepy?" Marcus finally broke the silence, his voice a mix of curiosity and dread. I considered it for a moment. Part of me never wanted to set foot near that place again, but another part, the part that had agreed to this adventure in the first place, was itching to make sense of it all. "Maybe," I replied, my voice uncertain, "but not tonight. Let's just try to forget about it for now." We said our goodbyes, but the comfort of my own bed offered little solace. The images from the house flashed behind my closed eyelids every time I tried to sleep. The mannequin, the scratched-out eyes, the unsettling cleanliness of that room. It was as if the house was still reaching out to us, its story unfinished. The next morning, under the harsh light of day, the fear from the night before morphed into a burning curiosity. I called Marcus, and after a brief discussion, we agreed to return to the house. This time, we approached the trip with a sense of purpose, armed with a camera and a more critical eye. The daylight stripped the woods of some of their menace, but the house still loomed ominously as we approached. We entered cautiously, the memory of last night's terror still fresh. With the sun streaming through the broken windows, the house felt less like a tomb and more like a derelict relic. We revisited each room, documenting our findings and noting the stark contrast between our two visits. The mannequin remained at the table, but the tea set that was on the table was no longer there. This stunned me, and as I looked around the room, I found them arranged on a cabinet against the wall in the corner. I nudged Marcus next to me with my elbow. Of course, he also noticed this obvious change. We didn't speak and looked at each other for a few seconds. Then we spent hours combing through the house, uncovering layers of dust and decay, but no real answers. It was in a small study, cramped and cluttered with books and papers, where we found the first clue. A stack of old letters tied with a ribbon, yellowed with age but still legible, revealed a correspondence between former inhabitants of the house. A woman named Eleanor and a man whose name was always signed simply as J. The letters were filled with talk of love and future plans, but as we read, a narrative of sorrow and loss began to unfold. The final letter, dated back to the 1950s, spoke of an impending visit from Jay that never seemed to have occurred. It was heartbreaking and eerie, as if their story was suspended in time, much like the house itself. Feeling like trespassers on personal grief, we left the letters as we found them. The house, once a place of life and dreams, now stood as a monument to lost love and broken promises. The creepy elements from the night before felt more tragic in the light of day, the mannequin a bizarre tribute to a waiting that never ended. As we left the house for the last time, the air felt clearer, as if acknowledging our understanding of its past inhabitants. The drive back was quieter, contemplative. We had sought an adventure, a simple distraction from summer boredom, but had stumbled upon a story of human depth and emotion, etched into the very walls of that old house. "Marcus, do you believe there are ghosts in this world?" "I don't know," he sighed and then added, "Maybe. What do you think?" In the summer of 2013, The stillness of our small Ohio town was punctuated by the kind of heat that baked the streets and made mirages on the horizon. My name is Mike, and this was the summer I turned 30, a milestone I met just a short walk from the house where I'd grown up. Amid the mundane rhythm of suburban life, there was an oddity that had always captured the local imagination: an empty lot on Oakwood Street. It was an unusual gap in the otherwise unbroken line of neatly trimmed yards and modern facades, like a blank space where a story had been erased. The lot was overgrown, wild in a way that was out of place among the manicured gardens of our neighborhood. Kids whispered it was cursed, fueling their games with tales of ghostly figures and eerie lights. The adults dismissed it as an unfortunate blotch on property values, often speculating on why it never sold. But the lot remained, untamed and untouched, as if guarding its secrets from the encroaching suburbia. That summer, my childhood friend Alex, ever the dreamer, decided it would be the perfect spot to foster community spirit with a garden. "Bring the neighborhood together," he'd said with a kind of hopeful enthusiasm that was hard to resist. Despite my initial reluctance, I was more comfortable with spreadsheets than soil. I agreed to help, drawn more by the promise of camaraderie than by horticulture. We started our project under the relentless Ohio sun, cutting back the thick brambles and weeds that had claimed the lot. It was hard, sweaty work, far removed from the air-conditioned comfort of my office job. Yet there was something deeply satisfying about reclaiming that wild slice of land. About a week into our efforts, as we dug into the earth, our shovels clanked against something solid. We unearthed a rusted metal box, locked and heavy, exuding an air of mystery that was immediately intriguing. Alex's eyes lit up with the prospect of hidden treasures or secrets lying within. He insisted on taking it home to pry it open, promising to share whatever spoils it might contain. The next day, Alex didn't show up at the lot. Concerned, I stopped by his house after several hours of solo toil, only to find his car parked in the driveway but no answer at the door. Calls and texts went unanswered. It was unlike Alex to disappear without a word, and a nagging worry began to take root in my mind. I returned to the lot, intent on putting in just one more hour of work, but what I found sent a chill through me. The previously smooth dirt was now pockmarked with small, round holes, each about the size of a quarter. They hadn't been there the day before, and their deliberate arrangement felt ominous. As unease coiled in my stomach, I wrote it off as a trick of the heat, the strange patterns merely a product of dehydration or fatigue. But that night, our quiet town was torn from sleep by the wail of sirens. Alex's house was engulfed in flames, the fire so fierce that even the seasoned firefighters struggled to control it. By dawn, the house was nothing but charred remains, and Alex was missing. The investigation yielded more questions than answers, with whispers of foul play competing with theories of a tragic accident. Yet, in my heart, I couldn't shake the feeling that the mysterious metal box and its contents had ignited more than just the physical fire. With no sign of Alex and no progress on the garden, the project on Oakwood Street came to a halt. The lot seemed to sneer at me, its secrets buried just beneath its surface. It was as if the land itself held a grudge, keeping its history jealously guarded. Then, one dusky evening, a strange tapping sound from the lot stopped me cold. It was faint but rhythmic, emanating from the ground, as if the earth itself was beating a somber drum. I dismissed it as a figment of my stressed imagination, but the sound persisted over the following days, growing louder and more insistent. It wasn't long before others started hearing it too, speculating about subterranean pipes or trapped animals. However, the noise was too structured, too intentional to be dismissed as mere mechanics or wildlife. Compelled by a mixture of fear, curiosity, and unresolved guilt over Alex's disappearance, I found myself drawn back to that forsaken lot one night, armed with nothing but a shovel and a desperate need for answers. The tapping seemed to guide me, focusing my efforts as I dug into the cold, hard ground. Finally, my shovel struck something solid. The night grew eerily quiet. The tapping stopped abruptly as if the earth had been holding its breath. I cleared the dirt to reveal a wooden lid, part of a long-buried well or shaft, obscured by time and neglect. A rush of fetid air escaped as I pried it open, and from the depths below, a faint cry for help echoed up towards me. Shining my flashlight into the darkness, I was met with a sight that clenched my heart with both shock and relief. There, in the muck and shadows, was Alex. As I peered down into the darkness, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the murky depths, my eyes met Alex's, wide with a mix of relief and utter exhaustion. His appearance was disheveled, mud-caked, and he looked as if he'd been through hell. The shock of finding him there, in a forgotten underground shaft in the middle of our childhood neighborhood, was overwhelming. "Mike!" he cried out, his voice hoarse and trembling. "Help me, please." Without hesitation, I called out for help, shouting into the night until my voice was raw. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, came running, and together we managed to pull Alex from the pit. Once safely on solid ground, wrapped in a blanket and sipping water, the story he told was as bizarre as it was terrifying. Alex recounted the events following his discovery of the metal box. After prying it open, he found not treasure, but another, smaller metal box inside, sealed and evidently more secure. Curiosity overriding caution, he managed to force it open, only to find it filled with a strange liquid and white chunks that resembled stones. Among these items was a piece of oil paper, which upon further inspection under his home's light, revealed itself to be a map. The map, Alex's voice shook as he spoke. It led to an underground passage, marked right beneath where we were clearing the lot. I couldn't resist. I thought maybe there was something valuable down there, something tied to the history of the town, maybe buried artifacts or old coins. His explanation was frantic, almost delirious. He admitted to exploring the passage alone, a decision that led to him slipping and falling into the shaft where he remained trapped until my discovery. "But the white chunks," he continued, his eyes widening with the memory, "they were white phosphorus. I didn't realize until one scraped against the carpet back home. It ignited instantly. That's what started the fire. I barely got out myself." As he spoke, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. The mysterious fire, the sudden disappearance, the holes in the lot which, in hindsight, were likely small vents or breathing holes from the old underground structures, perhaps destabilized by our digging. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The local authorities got involved, sealing off the lot to further investigate the underground shaft and its connections. The town buzzed with the news, the story of Alex's survival and the bizarre circumstances surrounding the metal box captivating everyone's attention. In the aftermath, the community rallied together. The lot on Oakwood Street was eventually turned into a small park. For me, the events of that summer changed something fundamental about how I viewed our sleepy town and its hidden depths. It wasn't just the physical uncovering of its underground secrets, but the realization of the layers of history and personal stories that lay buried beneath the surface of our everyday lives.